Hola, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Strange. This is a Beyond the Strange Classic, and we will be getting back to live, full episodes, 2 hours of Beyond the Strange every Wednesday night on the Strange Days Media Network and etalk.tv radio network. Thank you for being patient. Stay strange, everyone, and hasta.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
Broadcasting live just outside the Napa Valley through the mystical Sonoma Mountains. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I am so stoked. I am super stoked. I am beyond stoked. It's going to be a great show. A great show. It is Sunday, October 18th, 2020, the year of our Lord. And we have an awesome show for you tonight. Paranormal researcher, author Nick Redfern will be joining us in just a little bit. Remember, the call-in number for tonight is 1-800-588-0335. Again, that number is 1-800-588-0335 when the phone lines are open. And typically that's more or less 15 minutes past the first hour of the show. So there you go. It's going to be amazing. I'm just psyched. I'm so psyched. It's going to be great. And anyways.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Enough of that. Earlier, I've also heard of a story about the time traveler John Titor, or Titor, however you want to pronounce it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, Russ, is because, CERN's at it again. They're revving up their huge, massive collider to smash atoms and create little mini black holes. Now, here's the interesting part. All right, so a little bit backstory on who John Titor is. So, back in the early 2000s, even before that, I believe it was on Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM when he was doing the show, and it was 1998. He received a fax machine. This is how old this is. A fax machine. He got a message on his fax machine talking about some of the things that are going to happen, and that he's a time traveler and all this stuff. And, Art Bell shared it and stuff, and that's cool. And then in 2000, there was one of those old style community online, boards, electronic boards, where people would go and message and leave, kind of like Reddit, right? So I forgot what his handle was, but he called himself John Teeter, and he's from the year 2036, and he went back into time to 1975 to retrieve an old IBM, I want to say 5600 or something like that. Now, here's an interesting thing about this, Russ. Nobody knew about what this PC could do, this old IBM. Apparently, the reason why John Teeter was retrieving this PC was because it spoke multiple different, computer languages. And at the time, there was no other PC that could do it. I don't even think there's a PC that can do it now. And so IBM never really talked about it. They never made it public that this machine could do this, right? Later on, after this happened, IBM finally came forward and said, yes, we do have a 5600 or 5100, whatever it is. And yes, it does have all these capabilities that you're claiming that, this guy talked about. IBM said that. So right there, that's a fact. Not many people have that knowledge. And so that was really, really crazy. It's a very in-depth. I mean, put it this way. No one has proven yet that this is a hoax. No one's proven it. No one's debunked it. The only thing they can go on is he did have some predictions. Now, some of those predictions, of course, didn't come true. One of them being a devastating nuclear war so far has not come true. Knock on wood. So supposedly, the world war was in 2015. Of course, nothing happened, thank God. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing that's going to happen yet. He did predict the Iraqi war. He claimed something about the one of the Twin Towers. This is back before 9/11. He said something about to the effect, he was asking people what happened to the buildings, in New York. In my time, I don't see them anymore that people are talking about. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. There's a lot of things that, it's a 5100, by the way, IBM. Anyways, so the reason why I'm bringing this up, dude, is because he talks about a civil war. Okay. And right now, things are looking really, really, really grim. Especially right now with election year.
Yes.
And there's lots and lots and lots of talk about how people are going to start, doing. There might be a civil war because of this. Because of whoever wins, whether Trump wins, whether Biden wins, it don't matter. You know? And I think it's important. People need to understand. Look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I swear. I'm telling you, you need to go out and get some food. And try buying a gun, because I'll tell you right now, it's probably next to impossible right now to get, especially to get the gun that you want. I mean, you'll have to go and you'll have to settle for what you can get right now. And if you can get ammo, that's another thing. Right now, I'm serious. I live in California. It is hard to find a gun. And a gun that you want, because at the time I went a couple months ago to go try to get a gun, they said that nobody's making guns right now, and a lot of it has to do with COVID. So COVID has really, really put a damper on almost everything you can think of, everything. Until it affects you. Of course, you're not gonna. It's not doing anything. Blah blah blah. Yeah, yes, it is. You just don't know about it. But, check out John Teeter. Check out his predictions. It's worth taking a look at. And I'm telling you guys, I'm not trying to scare you, but I just want you guys to be aware that stuff's happening out there and we need to be aware of. So
perilous times are ahead. I 100% agree.
yep. Very much so, Ken. Ken in the strange chat is saying ammo is hard to come by, brother. That's what I'm saying. Very much so. All right. Got a couple more minutes before we go to break. So, Rusty, I'll go ahead and let you take this next story because you brought it up in the Beyonders chat, and it has to do with the Massachusetts Bridgewater Triangle, and then we can get to the last story before we go to break.
Yeah, very interesting article I posted in the Beyonders crew, which if you guys go to Facebook, you can join the Beyonders crew. Dave or myself will preview. For the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, a lot of paranormal activity happening between the 3 points, cryptids, UFOs, ghosts, everything like that. It kind of makes me, wonder if a lot of all this is connected with like Bermuda Triangle, the Four Corner states out west and everything. It seems like there's, in parallels like that, there's always something that's, paranormal activity or UFO, especially UFOs. I mean, in the Bermuda Triangle, you see a lot with, UFOs and ships going down and everything. And Night Stalker just said that's his neck of the woods. That we were talking about that earlier before the show, and I was like, I wonder if he has heard a lot about this. And he's sure enough, he said, you guys got to come and hang out. So that'd be pretty awesome to experience that.
I'd love that.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
That'd be awesome. But yeah, this is a really cool article, and go over to the Beyonders chat, and you'll see a lot. The link to it. Click on it and check it out, and it's pretty cool. I've always liked the Bermuda Triangle. Has been one of my favorite stories ever since like Unsolved Mysteries and Ripley's Believe It or Not and those kind of TV shows. So yeah, it'd be interesting to we need to investigate this more, Russ. I think so for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to love all the 70s shows from the Bermuda Triangle. Now they have a show on Travel Channel called the Alaska Triangle. So a lot of crazy stuff happening in Alaska. I know there was several years ago there was a jetliner flying from, I think he was flying to Japan, but he flew through Alaska. He encountered UFO and everything. So pretty interesting stuff. Really, really cool.
Very interesting. Well, definitely have to talk about that some more and follow up with some updates. Now, this last story kind of fell into my lap. I know we only got a couple minutes before the break, so I'm going to try to get through this. Demi Lovato says she contacted extraterrestrial life and posts UFOs on Instagram. Look, guys, I know how you feel about Demi Lovato. I don't know how you feel about Demi Lovato. I think she's a decent singer. She's a celebrity. She's with a young crowd and everything, and that's all good. But she's had her share of ups and downs, and I'm sure you guys are aware of that. But what caught my ear is she happened to be in where is it at? Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree. And I'll tell you folks, I've been to Joshua Tree for the whatchamacallit, what's that big conference that's out there?
Contact in the Desert.
Contact in the Desert. God, I'm just not remembering stuff. And you will see stuff in the sky. Trust me, you will. But anyways, I showed this link to Russ. I told him about it. And at the time, I just read the article and I saw some pictures of these two bright orange bar-like with a orange aura around it. That's really crazy looking, but it's so cool. Yeah. And I was just looking at the picture, and then I scrolled down more, and Demi Lovato actually caught the video of this thing, and people, you got to check this out. This thing is moving around like almost like a fly, stuck in a window, and it's crazy. It's the sky looks like the Northern Lights at some points. This is happening in Joshua Tree, but you guys have really got to check it out. It's pretty amazing, and all I can say is wow, But it's a
quite
pretty
a
good
catch.
one. It is. It's a great catch, and everyone needs to go check it out. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to our first break. And when we come back, you guys, we're going to get into some good stuff with Nick Redfern. And you do not want to go away. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. We'll be back right after this. Hola, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Strange. This is a Beyond the Strange Classic, and we will be getting back to live full episodes, 2 hours of Beyond the Strange every Wednesday night on the Strange Days Media Network and etalk.tv radio network. Thank you for being patient. Stay strange, everyone, and hasta.
You're listening to eTalk Radio only at etalk.tv.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, hauntings, and various cryptoids such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you're listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links to forums and social media. Available at YouTube, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio.
Parks. Welcome back, everyone. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all for being here tonight. As I said, we have a wonderful, awesome show for you tonight. We have Mr. Nick Redfern that's going to be joining us here in 1 minute, or as soon as I get through this bio. So, Nick Redfern has been interested in UFOs since 1978. His main area of research centers around determining what has been learned about the UFO subject at an official level in Britain. He has spent hundreds of hours at the Public Record Office in London and has uncovered thousands of pages of previously classified Royal Air Force, Air Ministry, and Ministry of Defense files on UFOs dating from the Second World War. Nick is the author of more than 60 books, including The NASA Conspiracies, For Nobody's Eyes Only, Keep Out, and The Real Men in Black, plus many more. He's been on many television shows, including those on Travel Channel, History, Sci-Fi, and National Geographic, and is a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM. Nick also lectures on the UFO subject, both in the UK and abroad. Find Nick on his website, nickredfern14.blogspot.com. And I just want to welcome back to Beyond the Strange Radio, Mr. Nick Redfern. Nick, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hey, Dave. Well, thanks for having me on as well.
That's fantastic, my friend. It's been way too long since we talked last. Last time we talked, it was about the immortality of the gods.
That's right, yeah.
It was quite a while ago. So we got a lot of good stuff to talk about tonight about the Martians. And again, we are joined by my friend and co-host, Mr. Russ Bailey. And we are definitely going to get into some good stuff. So first of all, how you been? How things going?
Oh, good, thanks. I'm sort of like the rest of us, just being careful and wondering when things are going to clear up. But other than that, I'm like just doing what I do, put a book out every few months and do what we're doing now, talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you had stuff on the back burner, I think COVID is like the perfect excuse to just get right on that, correct?
Well, my answer would actually be no.
Okay.
Tell you why? Because regardless of sort of what's going on right now, I like to sort of keep to what I call regular hours, which is like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And I think if I did anything other than that, I'd probably end up kind of fried. I like to sort of work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and I don't work evenings, don't work weekends, and Friday, when I've finished 5 o'clock, whatever I'm working on, the laptop goes into sleep mode. I don't touch that thing till Monday morning then. And for me, if I was to do it sort of 24/7, I think I would be fried. But by aiming to, kind of just split it into what I consider to be, a way of doing it, you don't get fried, keep on what you're doing. So, but, a lot of authors have different approaches. I have some friends who like to sort of work through the night, and whereas for me, like I said, I like regular hours, get it done, then I can have a good time. Well, I could, until what we've got now is going along. So.
Yes, that's true. Definitely. And it's good to stay busy. It's definitely good to stay busy. And you have definitely done that with 60 books, over 60 books, appearances, talk shows, not movies, but TV. I mean, it's just amazing what you've done for the paranormal community. And man, it's just it's a real treat and a privilege to have you on the show tonight. So I'm really happy.
Well, thanks, Dave. And it's one of these things that you have to have the passion for it. If I lost the passion, and the excitement for it all and the enthusiasm, there'll be no point doing it. So as long as physically I can do it, and as I and I want to do it as well, then I'll keep doing it. And when you mentioned my interest going back to 1978, I should stress I actually wasn't sort of running around like some crazy little kid doing UFO research in 1978. I wasn't even in my teens, but I was actually starting to read books on the subject when I was about 7 or 8. Not kind of really deep books, but things that were sort of early UFO books for kids and Bigfoot book for kids and things like that. So so my interest sort of goes back to when I was about 7 or 8, 6, something like that, reading books, and then took it further and thought, well, this person or that person can write a book. Why don't I give it a go? And that's really what happened, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that for me, growing up in the 70s, because I'm a 70s child. I was born in 1970 myself. Here in Northern California, and growing up, I mean, I remember hearing about all the stuff about Bigfoot, of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film didn't come out too long ago, and there was a lot of talk about that. And then, of course, we had the UFO phenomena with oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but the couple in the early, I want to say the early 60s.
Betty and Barney Hill.
The Hills. Thank you very much. See, this is why I have Russ with me, because Russ he just chimes right in. He reads my mind. He's like, I know what you're talking about, Dave. So he just comes right out and says it. But yeah, growing up in the 70s, a lot of that stuff was happening. And then you started getting shows like, Unsolved Mysteries, Ripley's Believe It or Not, and, In Search Of. Oh my gosh. I mean, that was like, I had to watch In Search Of. And so a lot of these topics that we talk about now were talked about way back then. And it was the 70s when we really started hearing, for me, about Mars, and about, a lot of things that they were learning about Mars. What made you want to write this book about the Martians today as opposed to back then? Well, of course, back then you were younger, but when you started your writing career?
Well, actually, part of it was connected with Mars itself.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that really got me interested was when NASA released the photos of what became known as the face on Mars.
Yes.
And I think just about everybody, whether you're interested in these subjects or not, about everybody has heard of the face on Mars in the same way that most people have heard of Area 51 and Roswell and Bigfoot. There's certain things that most people have heard of. And when those pictures of the face on Mars were first shown to the public, it really got me interested. And again, that was back when I was still a kid. And there were a couple of TV shows that covered it back in the UK. Again, when I was sort of about 11 or 12, and I never really forgot, those photos. They had this kind of eerie appearance, almost sort of hypnotic, this sort of huge, what looked like a huge carved face looking up from the surface of Mars. And so I never really forgot about that. And over the years, when there was a new development of a mysterious nature on Mars, I would, file it and put it together with all the other material. And then eventually I thought, well, why not at one point put all this together, and so where people can have sort of a comprehensive book that pretty much covers all of the various anomalies that have been found on the surface of Mars, rather than, having to go through 15 or 20 books to get this and to get that. I felt try and create something that's almost sort of encyclopedic, that people could dig into and understand from sort of coherent situation as to how the developments in the search for the mysteries of Mars, how it began, and what NASA thinks about it, what the UFO community thinks about it, and put it all out there for everyone to see.
How long did it take you to write this book? I mean, not like in the sense of, it only took like a couple months to put it together. But I mean, over the years, all of the data, all of the information that you got and researched, and the people that you talked to, how long would you say it, what was in the, the years in the making?
Well, collectively, in terms of putting all the material together, I would say probably about 3 years. But in saying that at the same time, I was working on other projects as well and doing articles and TV work and conferences and lectures, that kind of thing. So, it wasn't a case of, just sort of heads down and doing the whole thing across 3 years. It was, collectively, it was probably about 15 months of writing, and then using all the background data that I already got, a lot of it, putting it together. But when I've got all the data, I can sort of those things out within a few months,
right?
Quick. It's a kind of putting them together, sort of machine-like,
Yeah, no, I get it, but it just seems to me that there's so much data over the years, that I caught in this book while reading it, and I was just like, man, Nick has just been on this from day one, from like years and years ago, and that's awesome. That's really awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. How about let's talk a little bit about the Martian environment. What was the atmosphere like? What was its landscape?
Well, right now it's not good. Mars's atmosphere is extremely thin. In other words, if you were an astronaut jumping out of a craft on Mars and you took your helmet off, you would be dead in seconds, maybe less than that. And the temperature is not sort of amenable for us either, which is kind of ironic, because if you look at the photographs, a lot of the photographs of Mars itself, it kind of actually does look quite hospitable. It's sort of got this orange kind of appearance, and there's hills and mountains, and the kind of environment that does look inviting, but it actually isn't. And certainly, if you were to come to Mars, or go to Mars, I should say, there's no way you could live on there, unless you really significant, well-advanced spacesuit. And without that, there's just no way to survive. There's barely no atmosphere, barely any oxygen. I won't say it's a dead world, but for beings like on our world, we couldn't live there. But that's not to say that Mars doesn't have its own life forms, which we can come to later, which could actually almost certainly, adapt to their environment, even though we're not able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that it's not a hospitable type of environment, but I want to believe that at one time it was, and I know we're going to talk about that as well. So, a question: what is Cydonia, and what does it have? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Cydonia or Cydonia. What does it have to do with Mars? What is Cydonia all about?
Well, it depends on whose perspective you take on the mysteries and these anomalies that you can see on Mars. Now, Cydonia is one particular area on Mars which was made famous because that's the area of Mars where the face on Mars was first photographed in 1975 by NASA. Now, if you look at the face, it does look like, eerily like a human face pushing up from the surface of the Mars and looking up to the sky. And NASA doesn't deny at all, the existence of what's become known as the face on Mars, but they kind of take the view that it's like seeing, the face of a dog in a cloud, or, somebody thinks they've seen a picture of Elvis in a cup of coffee or something, that's like a genuine, real phenomenon, and that is NASA's approach to it. However, one of the intriguing things is that the face on Mars itself is not alone. For example, in the same area, there are a number of what look just like pyramids, but having had some kind of severe damage made to it. However that was done, we just don't know, and probably will never know. But to have something that kind of face-wise looks superficially like the Sphinx in Egypt, and then you see these heavily damaged pyramid-type structures not too far away at all, then, that is why that whole aspect of this has become so famous or arguably infamous. Now, Some people have said that when the face on Mars was filmed again a few years later, actually in 1998, a number of people said, well, the new pictures didn't sort of look as good as the earlier photographs, and there's actually a good reason for that. And for the answer to that question, I actually, a few years ago, interviewed a late friend of mine, Mac Tonis, who was someone who was also deeply interested in the face on Mars scenario, and he really sort of coined it and brought it to the table when it comes to this issue of the differences between the photos in 1975 of the face and those taken in 1998. And I'll just tell you what Mac stated and how and why it gets to the heart of this controversy. And it's only just a small quote, so I'll tell you what he said. When NASA released the first Mars Global Surveyor image of the face in 1998, they chose to subject the image to a high-pass filter that made the face look hopelessly vague. This was almost certainly done as a deliberate attempt to nullify public interest in a feature that the space agency is determined to ignore. Now, these high-pass filters actually do distort and change the imagery. So now the big question is, was that done deliberately, or was it done because NASA just wanted to get it off their hands? You know, you could look at it from both perspectives, really. But the most important thing of this is that that's the reason why the more modern-day images of the face on Mars are actually not as good and as clear as the ones from previous times. You know, ironically, you think it should be the other way around, but by using one of these filters, it actually lessens the actual images.
Yes, I totally agree. Russ, did you want to come in, jump in on this?
Yeah, hi Nick, it's Russ Bailey here. I was going to comment also, you know, the monolith on Mars kind of piqued my interest in it also back when I read an article about it in the 80s. Really cool stuff. We do have a question in the chat room. The Night Stalker asked, Nick, do you think it's possible that life has migrated below the Martian surface?
Sorry, as what? Can you say that again?
Do you think it's possible that life has migrated below the Martian surface since it's so harsh and the atmosphere is so bad?
Oh. Yeah, well, that's a good question, because over the years, and not just in relation to microbial life, but to possibly even bigger life, a lot has been said about the possibility of there being Martian life deep under the surface of Mars. Now, as I said, on the superficially at least, you know, and on the surface, there's not really you can see other than these strange, what seem to be like carved anomalies. However, if you look at the portions of Mars that at least we've been able to see some of these underground areas, we are actually seeing some very intriguing material. For example, not too long ago, in fact just a few months ago, NASA announced that they'd found three, not particularly large, but 3 lakes which were under the surface. They were sort of underground lakes. Now, we're talking about lakes of water, you know, our kind of water. You know, I mean, there is only one type of water, but you get what I mean. You know, they found 3 lakes of water. Now, on top of that, at the polar caps, there's an immense amount of water in the form of ice, and also there's a significant amount of water vapor in Mars as well. And of course, there's just about nothing on the planet that can live without water. So, in other words, now that we know that there is water under the surface of Mars, that really takes things to a different level. Because if there are microbes or possibly even larger creatures on Mars, the most perfect place for them to live and survive would be in these underground areas where we know for sure now there really are water lakes. And that, I think, is one of the most recent developments, one of the most important ones of the last couple of years. And where you've got water, you have life. And so there's no reason really as to why there shouldn't be life on Mars, because in some of the photographs that NASA has taken, some of them seem to show what look incredibly like bushes or trees on Mars, and they become known as banyan trees, B-A-N-Y-A-N. And for people who are listening, if you Google banyan tree and Mars, and that's B-A-N-Y-A-N, banyan trees and Mars, you'll see these pictures, which they're NASA's very own photographs, where they look like strange bushes and trees taken from one of the Martian orbiters looking down to the ground. Now, NASA's conclusion, or their theory, is that we're looking at ice crystals. But if you look at these images, they don't really look like ice crystals. They look like weird, strange bushes or trees. And of course, if there are bushes and trees on the surface of Mars, then they're clearly, obviously, not going to be the same as trees and bushes on our planet, because, it's a completely different world, a completely different environment. But the important thing is that for me, and for a lot of researchers of Mars, that the banyan trees do seem to be what they appear to be, namely trees. So if you've got water, and you've got underground water, and you've got bushes and trees, then you're one step to even more evolved life. So, it doesn't surprise me, when people get excited by these ideas and concepts of underground areas, with some sort of life. And but I mean, if we're talking about microbes, that's sort of one side of it. But, then you've got the more controversial aspects of, sort of larger life forms, possibly in the very distant past, entities that may not have been too different from us, humanoids. So,
right.
There's a tremendous amount of material to go looking for.
Yep, absolutely. And I remember, reading about that in your book. Also, I want to point out that you have these illustrations and pictures, Nick, in your book, including the the shrubbery or the vegetation that you were talking about. And this is Spreaker. Once again, we are speaking with our guest tonight and a great researcher and just an all-around nice guy, Mr. Nick Redfern. And you can find Nick over at, I believe it is, gosh darn it, where'd it go? Nick Redfern, Fortean.blogspot.com. And once again, Nick, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to speak to you again tonight.
Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for that.
And we just barely scratching, the surface of all this wonderful information. I feel like I'm a kid again. I mean, like I said, back in the 70s, this was amazing stuff. The face on Mars, of course, was what really got me intrigued and so many other people. And, there's, over the years, there's been a lot of information, especially about some of these structures, pyramids, monoliths, whatever you want to call them, on Mars. And I remember a part in your book where you are speaking with one of those researchers and authors, Mac Tonys. I believe that's how you say his last name. And I just like to know what kind of influence he was with you and how important it was for you and him to correspond and talk for your book, The Martians.
Yeah, well, Mac was someone who, like me, had a deep interest in the whole issue of the Martian mysteries. And unfortunately, he had a pre-existing heart condition, and he died suddenly at 34 in 2009. But he was someone who was someone who, took a look at the evidence, and he wasn't biased one way or another. Some of the anomalies he felt were genuine examples of ancient sort of gigantic structures created by some kind of ancient race, at least. But some of the other images he had his doubts about. So in that sense, he was very kind of in the middle and willing to look at both sides of the coin, so to speak. But he was one of the earliest people to really demonstrate the sheer number of photographs that came back from NASA. Now, Mac's book came out in 2003, so we're talking about almost 20 years ago. And of course, since then, a lot more pictures, photographs have come forward. But back then, sort of 17, 18 years ago, there was certainly less images than now. And as I said, one of the most important aspects of Mac's work was that he was able to sort of, dig through the online pictures, in various NASA websites where, at least some of these images could be found, and and he put them in his book. And I think when you've got these collective photographs, and we're told time and time again, well, it's just like seeing like I said earlier, like a dog's face in a cloud. There's only so many times you can be told that,
Right.
In other words, I think Mac that was his biggest, biggest part of his story was the fact that he was able to get a hold of these pictures. Because, it's one thing to be told the story of this and the story of that, but there's nothing better really than to see the images themselves and sit there and think, wow, that doesn't look like something that it was randomly created by nature.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely, something that, like, when you look at Stonehenge, you say to yourself, well, that can't be accidental. It's definitely something that was put there by someone or something. And you just kind of get the same sense when you look at some of these images from Mars, and it's just amazing, some of these things that you see. I see some images sometimes, like on Facebook, and of course nowadays we know how easy it is to CGI stuff and Photoshop a lot of this stuff. What's to say that a lot of the pictures that we see that claim to be from Mars are not from, let's say, Las Vegas or something like that?
Well, I mean, you do have to sort of look, careful. I mean, particularly if a picture comes through, from a whistleblower or, some Mr. Anonymous, that kind of thing. But what I was careful to do with my book was to use specifically NASA's photographs from NASA's own official websites. And I think that's the best way to do it. If you want to get an argument across to the skeptics and the debunkers, my argument to them is, if you don't like it, go and tell NASA, because it's NASA who's got the photographs.
Right.
I'm not saying or claiming that I found these pictures. I certainly didn't. Granted, it can take a long time to dig through all of these tremendous numbers of photographs that have come back from Mars. But yeah, I mean, that's actually comes to sort of the crux of the story, that the reason why there's so much interest is because these photographs are in the public domain. Now, the very fact that I was able to use these pictures in the book and demonstrate, these are all NASA photos, etc., etc., this has sort of given rise within Mars researchers, Mars research communities. This has sort of given rise to the idea that is there sort of some degree of disclosure going on, where agencies that have these images are putting them out there subtly and slowly, bit by bit, to acclimatize us to the idea that at one point there really was an ancient Martian civilization, or maybe civilizations, rather than just one. And so, the idea that we're going to be showed these images, and we're going to see more and more of them, and we become more and more acclimatized to it. I think that's an intriguing scenario, that sort of bit by bit releasing of the documentation. And whether or not, it's because some people in NASA are saying, oh, just put it out there because we're tired of it. I don't think that is the scenario. I think we are actually seeing some degree of sort of revelations, if you like, of what we have now and what we may have further down the line. And but it's interesting, when you said about Stonehenge, because one of the things I talk about in the book is something that's become known as Marshenge, and which was it's almost inevitable it was going to be called that.
Of course.
But it's basically an image of what looks like somebody sort of flown over Stonehenge at a height of a couple of 1,000 feet and took a photograph of it. That's really what it looks like. You've got these large stones and some of these smaller stones which are sort of peppered around almost in sort of a circular / egg shape, wider circle, but with smaller stones. And if you look online, Marshenge photograph, you'll see it, and it really does look like somebody photographed an ancient stone circle, down in the wilds of England. And ironically, the back cover of the book actually has me a photograph standing right in front of Stonehenge. Yep. So again, we've got one of these situations where somebody might say, well, that's just random stones and you're seeing and perceiving them how you want to. But again, like with the face on Mars, the banyan trees, and now with Marshenge, I don't think we're dealing with just random issues. And the more and more of these anomalies we get, the more and more difficult it becomes to just deny this and walk away from it. You can walk away from it, but that's not going to help the situation. We need to sort of confront it regardless of what the answers are.
Absolutely. And I do believe, Russ, we have another question?
Yes. Nick, you said earlier that the Martian civilization were kind of humanoids. What physical characteristics do you think they might have had? And do you think there's any still left on Mars?
Well, yeah, those are the those are the issues, I think, more than anything else that people want to know. It's one thing to have these ancient structures. It's an entirely different one and a bigger issue if there's still some degree of high intelligent entities on Mars. Now, mainly this story, or this part of the story, I should say, comes from the phenomenon of remote viewing. Now, I'm sure nearly all of your listeners know what remote viewing is, but for people who may not know, it's essentially sort of using the human mind, and very often using sort of distances and imagery in the mind to essentially try and, if you like, sort of look into the past, psychically look into the past. And the first team that I know with 100% certainty did this was actually none other than the CIA. The CIA. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to May the 22nd, 1984, when in total secret, the CIA ran a program to try and figure what was going on on Mars roughly around about 1 million years BC. And this is really intriguing because the big question is, why would the CIA be interested in what was going on Mars round about 1 million years BC? That's an important question. It's not like CIA personnel get up in the morning and think to themselves, "Oh, I'm going to remote view Mars today." That's not how it works at all. But there has to have been some reason that in 1984 set the CIA on this trek, almost, this psychic trek, to try and find out what happened on Mars in the ancient past. And so we would not have known about this had it not been for the fact that in 1984 was when the remote viewing was going on, but it actually was more than a decade before the CIA very quietly, declassified these files and placed them in the public domain via the Freedom of Information Act. But most people didn't even know about it because the CIA didn't really sort of publicize it. And the remote viewer they used to look into this essentially focused his mind on Mars in the distant past and reported seeing the Mars in a state of complete turmoil and destruction. Like the atmosphere was on fire. There was earthquakes, fires all over the place, and reportedly Martian entities, Martians on Mars, humans on the Earth. And reportedly they were seeing via the remote viewing these incredibly tall humanoids looking actually quite like us, but to a height of about 10 to 12 feet, which would be pretty daunting, to see someone like us, but sort of 12 feet tall. And so, in other words, the imagery that we have of the Martians came from 1984 with the CIA. And one of the interesting aspects was that when this strange and sort of almost planet-wide destruction was going on, that a lot of the Martians had fled underground. So again, we've got this issue of, an underground angle. And this isn't just sort of like a one-off thing. Over the years, a number of people have remote viewed Mars, and the most recent one was done by a good friend of mine, Kimberly Rackley, and she's a very skilled psychic and remote viewer, and she performed a remote viewing project for me on Mars, which collectively, I think that all the research that she did and the remote viewing, I think it was about 7 or 8 days collectively altogether. And again, we had a situation where Kim was seeing pretty much similar stuff, where, there were sort of asteroids and possibly confrontations between different creatures on the surface of Mars and under Mars as well. And Kimberly, she when she remote viewed Mars, she also saw these images of these very human-like but extremely tall Martians, and also some other creatures. One that was seen underground that was almost like a large ant insect type creature as well. And she also described some fascinating trees, bushes, that kind of thing. And so we're seeing, a portion of the story when Mars was at its height, I guess, almost like a paradise. But then you've got the other side of the situation where something went drastically, majorly wrong. And for whatever reason, it's not entirely clear, but everybody that's remote viewed this has said that something happened, some gigantic calamity. Now, whether it was like, a Martian equivalent of a nuclear war, or if it was possibly, as some people think, the asteroid belt, possibly a number of massive asteroids may have broken out of their orbit and collided with Mars with such force and size that it just destroyed the atmosphere, destroyed the planet to the point where, just about everything was forced to go underground. Now, people may say, well, how do we know this? But, the whole point, or the most important point, is that the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. Army used the remote viewing process on numerous occasions across a period of about 20 years. And they would not have continued to do that had they not had realized that this was actually real, So I always tell people I think remote viewing is one of the most important ways and means to look back into the past and see the things that we cannot see normally. And for the CIA, to set up a project to actually do this, demonstrates again that agencies behind the doors have a very, very deep interest, not just in Mars,
right,
but in the distant areas of Mars, and that's an important thing. And, you add that to Kim Rackley's work as well, and, I really do think we have a situation where Mars was once, a thriving world, and something happened to where almost overnight it became, just a world in pieces, really.
Yeah, and that was going to be one of my questions too, is what kind of society did Mars have, and was it anything similar to ours? Was it more similar to possibly Atlantis? Was very highly technologically advanced for its time, and could that be connected to the Martians themselves?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a good point. About the Martians themselves, etc. I would say that they did have sort of a highly expansive and extensive culture,
mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about, you mentioned like Atlantis and things like this. I mean, the one thing or the one collective pieces of things that have survived are these incredibly huge carvings and anomalies that seem to be, the remains of massive buildings. And, when you look at some of them, they seem to resemble pyramids and sphinxes,
mm-hmm.
and things like this. Then, to me, that suggests a genuine, large, ancient culture, which
Egypt
had, they had kind of like the same kind of approach we take to the old buildings and ancient cities that we can find and excavate today. So I think we're dealing, with a highly advanced civilization, one that was sort of attuned in with architecture and things like this, and I guess really, why shouldn't it be like that if they were highly advanced and with cultures and civilizations, families, the whole thing? There's no reason why, they should not be too dissimilar to us when it comes to the issue of, their civilization.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give people the opportunity right now, if you want to call in. The phone number is 1-800-588-0335. Once again, the number is 1-800-588-0335. If you want to call in and speak to Nick, you have any questions, comments, you want to share anything, your experiences, please do so. I know it's about 6 minutes before the next break, our last break. And I just want to mention again that the first caller does win those tickets to thefringefest.com when you call in. And so anyways, I wanted to do that. That's really amazing information. I'm just blown away. Even though I've already, read a lot of this information in your book, Nick, just, hearing it from you, it really makes sense. And, when I think about some of those beings that you were talking about, I think about, the Nephilim that was talked about here on Earth and in, biblical verses and the Bible and that sort of thing. Any connections between possibly religion and Mars? Maybe, perhaps?
Well, yeah, there is. And I think that could be one of the reasons why there's been such a denial of, what may have happened on Mars. Because I think when you bring things like religion into aliens and UFOs, it really polarizes people into different camps, and it can create a lot of controversy, and emotional controversy as well. And I often think that one of the major reasons why we haven't been told the truth of what really happened on Mars is because it may impact on our history and religion if we were to find the true story. Now, we mentioned how Kim Rackley and the CIA both remote viewed Mars and both saw imagery of these large, giant humanoids. Now, if you think about it, in one of the most intriguing aspects of our ancient history is that you can find stories of ancient giants all around the world. For example, you've got King Gilgamesh. You've got the giants in the Old Testament, where it tells of, them taking human women. And in other parts of the world as well, you have stories of giants, like, for example, Goliath. And there's a legend which is born out of, it could be born out of reality, but there's a legend that Stonehenge was supposedly built by a race of giants. Now, I don't think that's literally true, but I think it's possible that the story was born out of the fact that there was a knowledge of these ancient giants. And, of course, if you take the view that the giants in the Old Testament are essentially that it's a religious story, what happens if it's found that those giants were actually Martians that possibly made it to Earth after their world basically sort of, deconstructed itself? And that is one of the interesting theories that a lot of researchers go along with, namely the idea that when the Martian world really started to collapse, including the atmosphere, etc., as many as possible fled to the Earth and were perceived by the earlier people on Earth as gods, as deities, but they were just really Martians that made it to Earth and started a new civilization here. And for us to find that they weren't deities, they weren't gods, they were just creatures from another world trying to survive, and they come here. If that was proved and that was revealed, that would have a major shock for the entire world of religion. And I think there probably are people who know the full story, or at least to the greatest degree that we can, but they just don't know how to tell us. I don't think anybody within government or in the intelligence agencies knows how to stand up and say, hey, we've got this story to tell you, that religion is actually based on aliens. And so I think they've decided the best thing to do is to say nothing. If they can't say it without causing calamities and culture shock, then let's say nothing at all. And I think that could be what's going on with Mars and as to why we're not being given the full picture.
I totally agree with you. We do have a phone caller, but we're going to have to take that call on the other side of the last break of the show. We are speaking with paranormal researcher, author, and speaker Nick Redfern right here on Beyond the Strange. Don't go away. We'll be right back right after this.
Hola, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Strange. This is a Beyond the Strange Classic, and we will be getting back to live full episodes, 2 hours of Beyond the Strange every Wednesday night on the Strange Days Media Network and etalk.tv radio network. Thank you for being patient. Stay strange, everyone, and hasta.
Hi, this is Susan, aka Astro Lunatic, and I am your host for Astro Lunatic's Guide to the Universe, where we look at what the hell is going on in the heavens and what is up your anus. Thanks for joining me on etalk.tv.
All right. Once again, this is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Tonight we are speaking with paranormal researcher, author, speaker Nick Redfern. He's the author of over 60 books. I mean, from UFOs to the Men in Black to Bigfoot to the Martians. And you can find Nick on his website, Nick Redfern, fortean.blogspot.com. And once again, I just want to welcome back Nick Redfern to the show. Thank you so much, Nick, for spending your evening with us. It's been a fascinating ride talking about the Martians tonight.
No, thanks, Dave.
And right now, we also have our first phone caller. And by the way, winner of the 2 free tickets to thefringefest.com this Halloween on October 30th and 31st. And we'll get you the details. And I want to thank you, Dino, for calling into the show.
Yay. I just had my birthday, so I wanted to ask Nick
Happy
a couple
birthday.
of things. I wanted to ask, I respect a lot of the research and things that he has exposed through various books and various subjects, which are of quite interest to me. But I think right tonight I wanted to focus on that there is so much that, of course, the Internet, unfortunately, is where the lazy man's way to get information now, some good, a lot of it baloney. But the thing that's been bothering me the last is I wanted to ask Nick whether he has any evidence or has met anybody that could confirm that are we being hidden about the color of the sky on Mars? I've been told that it's really blue, but they put filters on the lenses. And also, there are so many, again, things on the Internet and some researchers who say, well, look at all these pieces of machinery and apparent non-organic looking things on the surface strewn about. And of course, I have no way to verify that. What do you know about that, Nick?
Well, what I can tell you about all the anomalies that have been photographed on Mars and have been brought back to Mars and have been downloaded by NASA and put on their websites, all of those images are 100% genuine. You know, none of the pictures, like for example, in my book particularly as well, and all the other research as well, everybody has pretty much used the real NASA photos, because NASA as a government agency, when the pictures are taken, they become public domain. That's basically how it works with government agencies. They don't have imagery like that doesn't have to be declassified through the Freedom of Information Act, because it already automatically becomes public domain. So just about all of the pictures that you can see on Mars of like these pyramid-type structures, the banyan trees, all of those are legitimate images taken by NASA. Now, of course, as mentioned briefly earlier, you can never be sure that somebody may have fabricated an image or, Photoshop or whatever. But the fact is, it's important to, do your research and demonstrate which is real, which came from NASA, and which came anonymously. And now, just because something's anonymous, it doesn't mean there's no validity to it. It just means we need to be very careful and let people know what we know for sure and what we don't know for sure. And but as I said, those images that we've been talking about earlier, all of those are genuine NASA images. Now, on the other side of the coin, when you talk about Mars and the atmosphere, this is actually one of the sort of more intriguing aspects of the Mars controversy, where some researchers think, that the photographs have been doctored to make it look like Mars has this sort of continual, overwhelming sort of orange atmosphere. And some people have actually, changed the atmosphere or changed the pictures to demonstrate what it would look like if the atmosphere and the sky was blue like here. And if you look at some of these pictures, it really is kind of incredible. It looks like you're sort of taking a trek across New Mexico,
Very interesting.
across the deserts. But the big question is, to what extent that theory or that kind of debate, has validity to it. But and again, when you mentioned about, for example, the atmosphere, now we know pretty much that the atmosphere on Mars is extremely thin. But then also, within the conspiracy realms, there are people who've said, well, they have proof, that the atmosphere is much stronger than we know. I don't dispute that could possibly be the case, but to make such a controversial case along those lines, we really need evidence. And, to be honest, we don't have that evidence. What we have is hearsay and claims from people. And now, of course, hearsay and claims are very different from scientifically examining the atmosphere. And so, in other words, we need to be very careful and balanced as to what we know for sure versus what, circulates around on the internet.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it's Mars being closer than it's been in many years. I was looking at it on my deck earlier tonight, but on a very clear night away from a town, you do see a red tinge, but it makes me wonder why a planet almost the same size as Earth lose so much atmosphere. It should have, if it's got water, it should have oxygen at higher levels.
Well, yeah, this is one of the issues. As far as we know in terms of what we're told, Mars doesn't have very much of an atmosphere at all. And, it would be it would be impossible for you to step out of a spaceship, in T-shirt and jeans. You'd be dead, However, I don't go down this path too much because we don't have enough evidence either way. But I've heard all these stories, about how the sky really being blue and all the pictures have been filtered, etc., and changed. But my answer to this is, well, show me the evidence that it's been done, And I don't think I'm being overcritical in saying,
No, not at all.
This is really controversial, so tell us what you've got. And if somebody's got something, well, let's have a look at it. But up until then, we're in a position where it's kind of like a, wait and see for all of those kind of controversial things about the oxygen levels and the sky color. We don't have anything solid on that.
There you go.
Yeah, it just bothers me that after, I was around when the moon landings happened, and we were going to be 10 years on Mars, and now I wonder what's driving the United States to go to Mars now. I can see going back to the moon because we can mine, but it is very strange that all of a sudden there doesn't seem to be a profit right now in going to Mars. So what was the big spark to push this new wave of exploration?
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about sort of going to Mars, right. I mean, when we first sort of landed on the moon, there were going to be plans to have like a moon base, and then that base would be extended to sort of like a second and a third one, where they could interjoin. And then the next thing would be, flights to Mars. And the first moon landing was 1969, and we're talking about 51 years ago now, and we still haven't sent people to Mars. Now, I think the big stumbling block, the big irony is it's actually much easier to send probes to Mars than to send people. We've got a lot of we've got the orbiting craft, which taking, aerial photographs in orbit, looking down to the planet. And then you've got the rovers, which sort of rumble across the landscape, taking pictures on the ground. Now, all of that works for the most part, not always, but for the most part, that all works really well. And we have, some fantastic pictures coming back from Mars, not just with these anomalies, but just with the general landscape itself. But the other issue is when you want to bring people into the equation. Now, it's important to know that Mars actually has an erratic orbit. It's like, a year here is 365 days. But Mars's orbit is actually very different. For example, its distance from the Earth actually isn't the same all the time because of its sort of erratic orbit. Now, the average distance from the Earth to Mars is 140 million miles. Now, to give you some idea, the distance from the Earth to the Sun is 93 million miles. Mars sort of is at its furthest is 140 million miles. So, we're talking about 50 million miles further from the Earth to the Sun. So it's an incredible distance away. Now, if you're going to send, a craft from the Earth to Mars, you're going to need something like the craft that went to the moon. 3 guys crammed in like a sardine can. That's not going to work for Mars. You will need something. We probably would need a crew of about 5 or 6 at least. You would need a large craft because you'll be talking probably each distance, getting there and coming back, each journey based on current figures would probably take, on considering our technology right now, it would probably take about 2 to 3 years to get there, maybe 2 to 3 years to get back. That's sort of 4 to 5 years for 7 or 8 people on a spacecraft going to Mars and then coming back after maybe 6 or 7 weeks on the surface. You could imagine really the psychological impact that would have on people stuck in a spacecraft, going to Mars with nothing but looking out the window of black and little, stars in the background, and if there's any problems, health problems, let's say 6 months into the flight, and your major leading doctor, medical expert on the ship has a heart attack. What are you going to do? You can't turn around when you've gone 60 million miles.
That would be bad.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these things that have to be thought about when we're talking about taking people to Mars or sending people to Mars. So right now, I think, although there's a lot of thought and, excitement about sending people, it really is a dicey situation to do that even now. And it wouldn't surprise me if they sent more and more robotic probes. But that would work well, if you imagine like sort of 20 or 30 drones all going across the landscape. I mean, we could find incredible data, but it would be cool, admittedly, to see the first person who walked on the surface of Mars.
I would absolutely love to see that, Nick. And Dino, we'll get you the information to those tickets. And thanks for calling, buddy, and happy birthday. And
thank you very much, and it was a pleasure.
Absolutely, and stay healthy. Stay out of that smoke, Dino.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good night. You're sounding great, by the way. This is a great feed.
All right, thanks a lot, buddy. Have a good night. A lot of good stuff. Thank you, Dino, for calling into the show, and he is the winner of the 2 tickets to thefringe.com or thefringefest.com this coming Halloween. Mr. Russ Bailey, you have a question for us.
Yes. So, Nick, Dave and I are big comic book nerds.
Big time.
And, so Jack Kirby, he was an illustrator of various comics, worked on a 3-part miniseries called Race for the Moon. Why is that important information regarding Mars?
Oh, yeah, well, that's actually a good question. Jack Kirby was a famous comic book artist and writer from the 50s onward, and mainly doing sort of like superhero kind of comic books for people like Marvel Comics and DC Comics and companies like that. And in the 1950s, Jack Kirby wrote this story. It's like a 3-part story, and basically the title of it was The Face on Mars. And the story it revolves around an American team of astronauts going to Mars, and while they're there, they find this huge carved face on Mars. And what the primary sort of hero in the story manages to get inside the eye sockets of the creation, if you like, the carving, this huge face, and realizes that at some point in the distant past there'd been an ancient Martian civilization. And when you're talking about an ancient Martian civilization and the story revolves around a face on Mars, you have to wonder, and I do, and I speculate on this issue in the book, how is it that Jack Kirby so eerily came close to the reality of the situation that began to surface in 1975 when he was working on the comic book way back in the 1950s. And you can either say that this was some extremely bizarre coincidence, or there was more to it. And one of the interesting theories is that perhaps at some point in the 50s, the government said, well, why don't we start maybe filter a bit of the information out there for people to think about it, think about the concepts, and again, kind of, prepare us for a degree of disclosure, if you like. But the fact that it was even called The Face on Mars back in the 50s, that's a really weird story. It's almost if somebody went back in time, saw this and thought, wow, this is going to make a great story.
No kidding.
But there's no real answer beyond a really weird coincidental event, or somehow Jack Kirby knew about the face on Mars a couple of decades before the rest of us did, and that itself would be a profound revelation. If we could, we could answer that question. But and again, like with the anomalies themselves on Mars, I think there's a lot more to the Jack Kirby story than we actually know.
Seems like it. I mean, and not only Jack Kirby, but you have storytellers, like the movie, of course, came from the book John Carter of Mars. Amazing stuff. I mean, it would be incredible if that's what it was like on Mars before the disastrous apocalyptic ending of Mars.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is an interesting angle because one of the people who was fascinated by Mars itself was Nikola Tesla, a brilliant scientist, a very alternative, thinking outside the box. And had he had the opportunity to really, refine all of the programs and projects he was working on, we were probably having a better world to this day. But what's really interesting is at the height of his work, basically what happened was that Tesla said that he had apparently been communicating with Martians. And, the idea of somebody like Tesla, talking about communing and communicating with Martians, that's an incredible story. But what's intriguing is that other scientists over the years have also made similar claims, namely that they were sort of having mind-to-mind connections with Martians. So, I guess you could, wonder on the idea, could Jack Kirby have been sort of like a filter, if you like, from the Martians, presenting images, if you like, in his mind, him not actually realizing what was going on. Now, that might sound outrageous, but it's exactly what Tesla said, that he felt that he was getting communications from Mars. Now, we don't know the full story of what they may have told him, but if Martians really did contact Tesla, who's to say they didn't contact other important and noteworthy people?
Very possible. Got a few more minutes before the end of the show. I know we got one more question we're going to take from the Strange chat in Discord. Fire away, Russ.
Yes, Dan Shiny Captain says, will we see more evidence than is seen from NASA with the Mars rover planned from China and joint ESA/Roscosmos missions? And they probably currently are they probably currently on the way from the UAE?
Well, yeah, we should be getting more material. I mean, as long as the orbital craft and the rovers on the ground, as long as they're going, they're going to be producing pictures, and the more pictures that get produced, the more we're going to see. So there's no reason why this shouldn't carry on. I guess what we need is, yes, we found a lot of really strange anomalies that extremely thought-provoking. But what we really need is the definitive smoking gun. Now, one of them, I don't think it's not the smoking gun, but there's this one photograph from NASA that's become known as the face hugger photo. The face hugger being coming from the Alien movies with Sigourney Weaver. And you can actually see on one of NASA's pictures what looks like a facehugger crawling up the wall of a cavern or a cave on the surface of Mars. And if you Google, everybody listening, Google on Mars facehugger photo, you'll see what NASA says is probably just a rock, a piece of rock. But if you look at it, it doesn't really look like a rock. It looks like a circular creature with 8 limbs and a head at the top, like a cross between a crab and a spider of significant size, crawling up or crawling down this piece of rock on Mars. And to me, I can't really reconcile how you would make that, or how a part of a stone or a rock would look like that. But, that kind of, I won't say it's a smoking gun for sure, but it does look like what people have said it looks like, some sort of crustacean of large size crawling up a wall.
Yeah, I saw that picture, and I didn't put that together with the facehugger, but now that you mention it, yep, looks a lot like the facehugger that was in Aliens.
It really
Nick,
does.
We got just a couple more minutes, and once again, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a fascinating evening, and 2 hours just goes by too quick. Can you please, for the audience, let them know where they can find you and everything that's you?
Okay. Well, people can reach me at my blog, which is called World of Whatever. So you can Google Nick Redfern World of Whatever, or the address is Nick Redfern 14 FORTEAN.blogspot.com. You can also reach me at Facebook, and I have an Amazon page at Amazon. And always happy to chat with people, if they've got questions or they've had experiences and want some advice. I'm always pleased to be around and, help if I can.
Wonderful. Nick Redfern, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll definitely keep in touch, and please, always an open door for you, my friend, to come back to the show.
Oh, thanks a lot, Dave, and Russ as well. Thanks a lot.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too, guys. Thanks a lot.
Nick Redfern, everybody. What a fascinating evening talking about this subject about the Martians. There's so much we didn't get into, but I'm telling you, it is a fascinating book. Wonderful, wonderful. You need to go pick it up right now and add it to your collection. Thanks again, guys, everyone in the chat room. I love all the pictures that you were putting out there with the Martians and having to do with Mars and everything, and it's just amazing. And once again, thank you again, Mr. Russ Bailey.
Thank you, sir. Awesome show tonight.
Awesome show. Thanks again, everyone. Guys, have a great one. See y'all. Have a good night.